You just slapped a mafia boss in front of his entire family. Do you have any idea what you've done? Those were the words my manager hissed at me as I stood there, hands still trembling, watching the most dangerous man in the city touch his reddening cheek and smile at me like I'd just done something fascinating instead of suicidal. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been pushed so far, so hard, that your body just acts before your brain catches up? That moment when survival instinct gets confused with self-destruction and you can't tell the difference anymore? That's where I was. That's the moment that changed everything. But here's what nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes when you finally break, when you finally stop being afraid, when you finally say enough, that's not the end of your story. Sometimes that's exactly where your real life begins. My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm 28 years old. And this is the story of how I went from exhausted single mother working double shifts just to keep the lights on, to the woman who did the impossible. I slapped the most feared man in the city across his face in a room full of witnesses. And instead of destroying me, he looked at me like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to see him as human enough to hit. I know that sounds insane. Trust me, I lived it, and I still can't believe it happened. But before I tell you about that night, before I tell you about him, about what came after, about how a single moment of rage turned into the most intense and terrifying and beautiful thing I'd ever experienced, let me tell you where I was before everything changed. Because you need to understand how desperate I was, how tired, how completely out of options. You need to understand why I did what I did. And hey, I'm really glad you're here. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a good day. Maybe you're on your commute, maybe you're cooking dinner, maybe you're just trying to escape for a while. I get it. Life gets heavy sometimes. The weather where I am has been cold lately, perfect for staying inside with stories like this one. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment and let me know. I love hearing from you all. This story, I promise you, it's going to take you somewhere. It's going to make you feel things. And by the end, you're going to understand why sometimes the craziest decisions we make turn out to be the ones that save us. So if you're ready, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to hear a story about what happens when you stop being afraid. Because what happened after that slap shocked everyone, including me. But let me start from the beginning. 3 years before that night, I believed in fairy tales. I believed that if you worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, sacrificed everything, the universe would reward you. I believed that good people got good outcomes and that my son Danny, would grow up seeing his mother as someone strong and capable who could handle anything. I believed my marriage would last forever. I believed my mother would stay healthy. I believed I had time to figure things out. I was wrong about all of it. My husband left when Danny was 2. Just walked out one morning with a packed bag and a girlfriend I didn't even know existed. The divorce papers came 3 weeks later. No fight for custody. No child support. Just gone. Like we'd never mattered at all. 6 months after that, my mother got the diagnosis. Stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive. Expensive. The kind that eats through savings accounts faster than it eats through healthy cells. I went from being a stay-at-home mom with a decent middle-class life to being a single mother with a sick parent and bills that made my hands shake when I opened them. I needed work. Fast. The kind that didn't require a college degree I'd never finished or experience I didn't have. That's how I ended up at Carmelo's. Carmelo's Italian restaurant sat in the kind of neighborhood where people paid $40 for pasta and thought nothing of it. The building was old brick with ivy growing up the sides, the kind of place that screamed old money and family traditions. Inside, everything was dark wood and soft lighting, white tablecloths and wine bottles that cost more than my monthly rent. I was hired on the spot. They needed someone for the evening shift, someone who could start immediately, someone desperate enough to take whatever they offered. That was me. The work was brutal. My feet screamed after every shift. My back ached from carrying heavy trays. The kitchen was chaos, the customers were demanding, and the tips were the only thing keeping me afloat. But I showed up. Every single day. Double shifts when they'd let me. Because Danny needed new shoes, and my mother needed medication, and the hospital sent bills with numbers that made me want to cry. I became invisible. That's what happens when you're poor, and serving rich people. They look through you. They snap their fingers. They treat you like a robot programmed to bring food and refill wine glasses. I learned to smile through it. Learned to swallow the humiliation. Learned to say yes, sir, and of course, ma'am, and I'll fix that right away even when I wanted to scream. For 3 years, I survived like this. And then he walked in. The first time I saw Luca Niklaus, I didn't know who he was. I just knew he was different. He moved like someone who owned not just the room, but everyone in it. Mid-30s, dark hair, darker eyes, the kind of face that would be handsome if it wasn't so cold. He wore expensive suits that fit perfectly, and he never smiled. Not really. Just this slight upturn of his mouth that made you feel like he was laughing at a joke only he understood. The staff went rigid when he arrived. Michael, our manager, practically ran to greet him. The other servers avoided his section like it was cursed. And I heard the whispers. Mafia. Connected. Dangerous. The kind of man who could make problems disappear and nobody would ask questions. Great, I thought. Another entitled rich guy who thinks his money makes him a god. But I needed the tips. So when Michael assigned me to a section, I plastered on my customer service smile and walked over. That first night, he barely looked at me. Ordered his food with barely a word. Didn't say please or thank you. Left a massive tip that should have made me grateful, but somehow felt more like payment for my silence than appreciation for my service. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Always the same table. Always surrounded by men in expensive suits who watched everyone who came near. Always cold. Always demanding. Always leaving tips that were too big to be kind and felt more like control. And he was cruel. Not violently. Not obviously. But in small ways that added up. He'd send food back for imaginary problems. He'd call me over just to tell me to move faster. He'd snap his fingers instead of using words. He'd complain to Michael about service that was perfect, just to watch him grovel and apologize. The other servers hated serving him. They'd trade sections with me because they couldn't handle it. But I took every shift at his table because his tips paid for my mother's medication. Because his money kept Danny fed. Because I could swallow my pride for $200 a night. I told myself it was worth it. That dignity was expensive, and I couldn't afford it. I told myself I could handle anything. I was wrong. The night it happened started normal. Well, as normal as any night at Carmelo's could be. I'd been on my feet for 6 hours already. My second shift of the day. I'd worked the morning at a diner across town. Went home for exactly 40 minutes to make sure Danny got dinner and his homework done, kissed my mother goodnight, and came straight to Carmelo's for the evening rush. My feet were burning. My lower back felt like someone had tied knots in my spine. I hadn't eaten since 6 that morning, and it was now almost 9 at night. But I had 3 more hours to go, and rent was due in 4 days, and I was still short. So I kept moving. Kept smiling. Kept pretending I wasn't one missed shift away from homelessness. Luca came in at 8:30 with his usual crew. 6 men in expensive suits, all of them with that same dangerous energy. They took his regular table in the back corner, the one with a view of both exits. Of course. Michael assigned me immediately. Claire, you take table 12. And please, for the love of God, don't mess anything up tonight. He's already in a bad mood. How could Michael tell? The man always looked like he was in a bad mood. I grabbed my pad and headed over, forcing my exhausted face into something resembling pleasant. Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with drinks? None of them looked at me, except Luca. And when his eyes met mine, I felt something cold slide down my spine. He wasn't just in a bad mood. He was looking for a target. Water. No ice. And make sure the glass is actually clean this time. The glass had been clean last time. I'd polished it myself. But I nodded. Of course, sir. I brought the drinks. All of them perfect. All of them exactly as ordered. I distributed them carefully, professionally, with the kind of practiced grace you develop after 3 years of this work. Luca picked up his water glass, looked at it, looked at me, and set it down hard enough that water sloshed over the rim. I said no ice. There was no ice. The glass was clear. Everyone at the table could see there was no ice. But I bit my tongue, smiled. I apologize, sir. I'll get you a new one right away. One of his men snickered. Luca's expression didn't change. I brought a new glass. This one I'd checked 3 times. Absolutely no ice. Crystal clear. He didn't even look at it. Just waved his hand dismissively. Take our orders. I took their orders. 7 entrees, all of them complicated. All of them with modifications. I wrote everything down carefully, repeated it back, got confirmation from each man. When I brought the food 20 minutes later, everything was perfect. The kitchen had outdone themselves. Each plate looked like art. I set Luca's in front of him with extra care. Your veal saltimbocca, sir. Prepared exactly as you requested. He looked at it for a long moment, then pushed it away. This isn't what I ordered.
My heart sank.
Sir, I have your order written right here. Veal saltimbocca, light on the sage, extra lemon, no capers. I didn't say no capers. I said light capers. I looked at my notepad. My handwriting clearly said no capers, because that's what he'd said. I'd repeated it back to him, and he'd nodded. But I couldn't argue. Not with a man like this. Not when I needed this job. I apologize for the confusion. I'll have the kitchen remake it immediately. Michael appeared at my elbow, practically vibrating with anxiety. Is everything all right, Mr. Niklaus? Your waitress can't seem to take a simple order correctly. I am so sorry, sir. So incredibly sorry. Claire, go have this remade.
Now.
I went, even though my feet were screaming, even though I knew I'd gotten the order right, even though the kitchen staff would be furious at having to remake a perfect dish for no reason. The chef looked at my order slip, looked at the return plate, and shook his head. But he made it again, with light capers this time, even though we both knew the original order had said none. I brought it back.
Set it down gently.
Held my breath. Luca cut into it. Took one bite.
Set down his fork.
It's cold. It wasn't cold. It had just come out of the kitchen 30 seconds ago. I could see the steam rising from it. But before I could respond, he continued. And honestly, the service tonight has been terrible. You seem distracted. Incompetent. Maybe you should be working somewhere that matches your skill level. Like a fast food drive-thru. His men laughed. Actually laughed. Like humiliating someone trying to survive was entertainment. Something hot and angry flared in my chest. But I shoved it down. Smiled through it. I apologize, sir. Can I get you anything else? You can try being better at your job. I walked away before I said something I'd regret. My hands were shaking. My eyes were burning. I went to the back, took 3 deep breaths, and reminded myself why I was doing this.
Danny. Mom.
Bills. Survival. I could handle this.
Iden la bursa.
I went back out. Checked on my other tables. Brought drinks, cleared plates, forced smiles until my face hurt. An hour later, Luca's table was finishing up. I was almost free. Almost done with this nightmare shift. That's when he snapped his fingers. Literally snapped them at me like I was a dog. Waitress. Come here.
He walked over.
My feet felt like they were filled with broken glass. Yes, sir? Clear these plates.
Now.
I don't have all night. I started clearing. Moving quickly but carefully, stacking plates the way I'd been trained. Apparently not fast enough. Move faster. What are you, incompetent and slow? I kept working. Didn't respond. Just focused on getting through this. Then his voice cut through the restaurant, loud enough that other tables turned to look. I said now. Don't make me repeat myself. Or maybe you're too stupid to understand basic instructions. Every person in that restaurant heard it. Every server. Every customer. Everyone watched this powerful man humiliate a waitress over nothing. And something inside me broke. Not like glass breaking. Like a dam breaking. Like 3 years of swallowed anger and exhaustion and humiliation suddenly had nowhere left to go except out. I set down the plates.
Carefully.
Precisely. And I turned to face him fully. Luca was leaning back in his chair, that cold smirk on his face, enjoying his little power play. His men were grinning. Michael was approaching to apologize for me again. And I thought about Danny, about reading him stories every night and pretending everything was okay, about my mother in her hospital bed, apologizing for being sick, for costing so much, for being a burden, about my ex-husband who walked away because things got hard, about every person who'd ever made me feel small, about how tired I was, how completely exhausted, how done. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. The slap echoed through Carmelo's like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every fork froze midway to every mouth. The entire restaurant held its breath. I'd slapped the Mafia boss. Across his face. In front of his entire crew. In front of everyone. His head had turned from the impact. A red mark was already blooming across his cheek. His men were standing up, hands moving toward weapons I couldn't see, but knew were there. Michael made a sound like a dying animal. And I stood there, hand still raised, breathing hard, waiting for the consequences. Lucas slowly turned his head back to face me, touched his cheek, looked at his fingers like he expected to see blood. Then he looked up at me. Really looked at me. For the first time since I'd started serving him, he actually saw me. And he smiled. Not the cold smirk. Not the cruel upturn. A real smile.
Surprised.
Fascinated. Almost delighted. Finally, he said quietly. Someone with a spine. The restaurant stayed frozen. His men looked confused. Michael looked like he might pass out. I felt my knees starting to shake as the adrenaline caught up with what I'd just done. Lucas stood up slowly. He was taller than I'd realized. Bigger. More intimidating when he wasn't sitting down. He took a step toward me, and I forced myself not to back away. What's your name?
His voice was different now.
Curious instead of cruel. Claire. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Claire Mitchell. Claire Mitchell, who slaps men twice her size in front of their entire family. He tilted his head. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the stupidest. I haven't decided which yet. Maybe both, I heard myself say. His smile widened. He pulled out his wallet, extracted what looked like several $100 bills, and placed them on the table.
For the trouble, he said.
Then he looked at Michael. She keeps her job. And if I hear that anyone here gives her problems about tonight, you'll answer to me personally. Understood? Michael nodded, so hard I thought his head might fall off. Luca looked back at me one more time. Those dark eyes holding mine. I'll see you next week, Claire Mitchell. Then he walked out, his men following, leaving behind a restaurant full of shocked silence and me standing there trying to figure out what the hell just happened. Michael grabbed my arm the second the door closed. My office.
Now.
I followed him, my body starting to shake now that it was over. I'd just slapped a Mafia boss. I'd assaulted a customer. I was going to lose my job. Possibly worse. But as I walked to what I thought was my doom, all I could think about was that smile. The way he'd looked at me like I'd surprised him. Like I'd done something nobody had ever dared to do before. Like I'd woken something up in him that had been sleeping for a very long time. I had no idea that slap would change everything. That the most dangerous man in the city would become obsessed with understanding the fire he'd seen in me. That my life was about to get infinitely more complicated and terrifying and intense. That I'd just started something I couldn't stop. Something that would test every belief I had about strength and survival and what it means to be seen by someone who lives in the darkness. But I'd find out soon enough. Because Luca Niklaus never forgot a slight. And he never forgot someone who interested him. And I, apparently, had just become very, very interesting. Michael's office was barely bigger than a closet. One desk, 2 chairs, filing cabinets that looked like they'd survived a war, and the permanent smell of cigarettes even though he'd quit smoking 5 years ago. He closed the door behind us, and I waited for the explosion. The firing. The threats. Maybe even the police. Instead, he just stared at me. Do you have any idea, he said slowly, who that man is? A customer with terrible manners? That's Luca Niklaus. His family owns half the commercial real estate in this city. The other half they control, through people who owe them favors. And you slapped him. I sat down without being invited because my legs were still shaking. He was being cruel. He humiliated me in front of everyone. He could have you killed, Claire. The words hung in the air between us. Heavy. Real. Not dramatic movie talk, but actual truth spoken out loud in an office that smelled like old cigarettes. But he didn't, I said. He tipped me. He told you I keep my job. Michael ran his hands through his thinning hair. I don't understand it. I've worked here for 15 years. I've seen Luka Niklaus end people's careers for less than spilling water near him. And you slapped him, and he smiled. Maybe he respected it. Men like Luka Niklaus don't respect anything except power and fear. What he gave you tonight, that wasn't respect. That was interest. And that might be worse. I thought about that smile. The way his eyes had changed when he looked at me. The fascination in his voice. What do you mean worse? Michael sighed. Go home, Claire. Take tomorrow off. Paid. And when you come back, pray to God he's forgotten all about you. But I knew he wouldn't forget. Something in the way he'd said, I'll see you next week, told me this wasn't over. I just didn't know if that terrified me or thrilled me. Maybe both. I got home just after midnight. The apartment was dark except for the small lamp Danny always left on in the living room because he was still scared of complete darkness. He was 8 years old and trying so hard to be brave about everything. The divorce. His grandmother's illness. The way his mom worked all the time and came home exhausted. I checked on him first. He was asleep in his small bed, hugging the stuffed bear his father had given him before he left. Before he decided being a parent was too hard. I kissed Danny's forehead and pulled his blanket higher. Then I went to my mother's room. She was awake, reading by lamplight, her headscarf wrapped around her head where her hair used to be. Bad night, she asked. She always knew. Strange night. I sat on the edge of her bed. I did something stupid. How stupid? I slapped a customer. Her eyebrows went up. Did he deserve it? Absolutely. Then it wasn't stupid. Brave, maybe. Reckless, definitely. But not stupid. I love my mother for this. For always finding ways to make my worst decisions sound like courage instead of mistakes. He was a very important customer, Mom. The kind people are afraid of. And he didn't get me fired. He smiled. Then he left a huge tip and told my manager I keep my job. She set down her book and looked at me with those eyes that had seen me through every stage of my life. Every scraped knee and broken heart and terrible choice. So, what's the problem? I think he's interested in me now. Not in a good way. In a curious way. Like I'm a puzzle he wants to solve. Is he dangerous? Very. Is he married? I don't think so. I've never seen a ring or a wife. My mother smiled. Not her sick smile. Her real smile. The one from before the cancer. Then maybe you finally got someone's attention who can actually do something useful with it. Mom, he's in the Mafia. And your father was a drunk who gambled away our savings, and your ex-husband was a coward who abandoned his family. At least a mobster is honest about being dangerous. I couldn't help but laugh. Only my mother could make dating a criminal sound reasonable. I'm not dating him. I assaulted him. Potato, potato. I kissed her goodnight and went to my own room, the smallest bedroom in our tiny apartment. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every sound from the neighbors. The ceiling had a water stain from a leak the landlord kept promising to fix. My bed was a mattress on a frame I'd bought secondhand. But it was mine. It was home. It was what I was trying desperately to keep. I fell asleep thinking about dark eyes and a smile that shouldn't have been attractive but was. The next day was my day off. Michael's orders. I spent it doing laundry, helping Danny with homework, and taking my mother to her chemotherapy appointment. The hospital waiting room was full of people who looked as tired as I felt. People fighting battles nobody could see from the outside. The treatment took 3 hours. I held my mother's hand while the poison that was supposed to save her dripped into her veins. She dozed off halfway through, and I sat there thinking about money. About how much this cost. About the bills waiting at home. About the balance in my bank account that made me want to cry. I needed that job at Carmelo's. I needed those tips. Even if it meant serving a man who might be obsessed with me now. Even if it meant walking into something dangerous. I didn't have the luxury of being afraid. Fear was expensive, and I was broke. When I returned to work 2 days later, everything felt different. The other servers looked at me with a mixture of awe and fear. Michael watched me like I might spontaneously combust. Even the kitchen staff treated me differently. Is it true? Sophia, another server, cornered me in the back. Did you really slap Luca Niklaus? It was a reflex. Girl, you have more guts than brains. Do you know what his family does to people who disrespect them? Apparently they tip them $500 and tell them to keep their jobs. She shook her head. This isn't over. Men like that, they don't forget. He's going to come back. I know. And then what? I didn't have an answer. I just knew I'd deal with it when it happened. He came back exactly 1 week later.
Same time.
Same table. Same crew of dangerous-looking men in expensive suits. But something was different this time. He asked for me specifically. Michael pulled me aside before I went to his table. Be polite. Be professional. Don't slap him again. I'll try my best. I walked over with my notepad and my customer service smile firmly in place. Luca watched me approach with an expression I couldn't read. His men watched me too. Assessing. Judging. Trying to figure out what their boss saw in the broke waitress. Good evening, Mr. Niklaus. Gentlemen, what can I get you tonight? Luca leaned back in his chair. Hello, Claire Mitchell. The way he said my full name made something flutter in my stomach. Not fear exactly. Something else. Can I start you with drinks? Sit down. I blinked. Excuse me?
Seat.
He gestured to the empty chair at their table. We need to talk. I'm working. And I'm asking you to sit. Michael won't mind. Will you, Michael? Michael had materialized out of nowhere, practically bowing. Of course not, Mr. Niklaus. Claire, please sit.
He said.
Mostly because I didn't have a choice, and also because my curiosity was stronger than my common sense. Luca studied me for a moment. Then he said, Why did you do it? Do what? You know what? I looked around the table. 6 men staring at me. All of them waiting for my answer. This felt like a test. Like my response mattered more than it should. You are being cruel, I said finally. You humiliated me for no reason except that you could. And I was tired. I'd been on my feet for 13 hours. I hadn't eaten all day. My son needed new shoes and my mother needed medicine, and I was doing everything I could to survive. And you treated me like I was nothing. Like I was invisible. So I made myself very visible. Silence. Then one of his men laughed. Not mockingly. Genuinely amused.
Luca smiled.
That real smile again. Most people apologize.
Grovel.
Make excuses. You just told the truth. I don't have the energy for anything else. Tell me about your son. The question surprised me. Why? Because I'm curious. And because you're still sitting here instead of running away scared. So tell me, how old is he?
8.
His name is Danny. He likes dinosaurs and hates vegetables and asks questions about everything. And his father? Not in the picture. By choice. His choice, not mine. Luca nodded like this confirmed something he'd suspected. And your mother? She's sick. It wasn't a question. Somehow he already knew. How did you know that? I asked around. After last week, I was curious about the woman brave enough or stupid enough to hit me. So I found out. Single mother. Sick parent. Working 2 jobs. Living in an apartment that should be condemned, but the landlord doesn't care because the tenants are too poor to complain. Medical bills piling up. Always one emergency away from losing everything. My face went hot. Anger and humiliation mixed together. You investigated me? I'm a thorough person. You're an invasive person. His smile widened. I'm an interested person. There's a difference. One of his men cleared his throat. Luca held up a hand. Go eat. All of you. Leave us alone. They stood immediately. No questions.
No hesitation.
Just obedience. They moved to a table across the restaurant. Far enough away that we could talk privately, but close enough that they could intervene if needed. Now it was just me and Luca at the table. The most dangerous man in the city and the waitress who'd slapped him. "I want to make you an offer," he said. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity. It's a job. I have 2 jobs already. Quit them both. Work for me." I laughed. I couldn't help it. Doing what? I'm not exactly qualified for organized crime. My mother needs a companion. Someone to help her around the house, keep her company, manage her schedule. She's getting older, and she refuses to admit she needs help. I've tried hiring professional caregivers, but she hates all of them. Sends them away within a week. What makes you think she'd like me? Because you have a spine. Because you don't take disrespect from anyone, not even me.
My mother would respect that.
And you understand what it's like to care for a sick parent. You'd have empathy. I stared at him. You want me to be your mother's companion? Yes. Why? Because you need money, and I need someone my mother won't terrorize into quitting. It's practical. How much? He named a figure that made my breath catch. 3 times what I made working both jobs combined. Plus full health insurance that would cover my mother's treatments. And housing in his family's property, so I wouldn't have to worry about rent. It was too much. Too good. Too suspicious. What's the catch? The catch is you'd be working for my family. You'd see things.
Hear things.
Know things. And you'd need to keep your mouth shut about all of it. Complete discretion. No questions.
No judgments. Can you do that? Could I?
Could I work for a criminal organization, pretend I didn't know what they did, turn a blind eye to things that might be happening around me? For that money? For health insurance? For a safe place to live? Yes, I heard myself say. I can do that. Good. You start Monday. I'll have someone pick you up. Give your notice at both jobs tomorrow. Just like that. Just like that. He stood up,
Pulled out his wallet again.
left another stack of bills on the table. For tonight's service. And Claire? Yes. Don't slap my mother. She hits back harder than I do. Then he was gone, walking out with his men, leaving me sitting alone at his table with more money than I'd made in a month and a job offer that felt like a deal with the devil. But the devil was offering salvation, and I was desperate enough to take it. I went home that night and told my mother everything. About the offer, about the money, about the danger, about how I knew this was probably a terrible idea, but I was going to do it anyway. She held my hand and said, "Sometimes the only way out is through. And sometimes through looks like the scariest option. But you're brave, Claire. You've always been brave. Even when you didn't want to be." I gave my notice at both jobs the next day. The diner manager was disappointed but understanding. Michael at Carmelo's looked relieved. Like I was a bomb that had been ticking in his restaurant, and now someone else could worry about when I'd explode. That weekend, I packed up our lives. It wasn't much. Clothes, toys for Danny, books, my mother's medical supplies. Everything we owned fit into boxes that could be loaded into a single truck. Monday morning, a black car pulled up outside our apartment building. The driver was polite, professional, and completely silent during the drive. He took us to a house in a neighborhood I'd only ever driven through, never imagined living in. The house was beautiful. Old brick, big windows, a garden that someone actually maintained. Not a mansion, but comfortable. Safe. The kind of place Danny could play outside without me worrying. A woman answered the door. Late 60s, silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, eyes that assessed me in 3 seconds flat. "So you're the girl who slapped my son?" "Yes, ma'am."
I'm Claire.
She smiled. Actually smiled. Good. He needed slapping.
Come in.
"Let me show you where you'll be staying." And just like that, I stepped into a new life. A dangerous life. A complicated life. But a life where my son could have his own room, and my mother could get proper medical care, and I could finally breathe without constantly calculating whether we'd survive another month. I told myself this was just a job. Just employment. Nothing more complicated than caring for an elderly woman and keeping my mouth shut about family business. I didn't know that Luca's interest in me went far deeper than finding his mother a companion. That this job was really an excuse to keep me close. to figure out why I'd gotten under his skin, to understand the fire he'd seen in me and whether it was something he wanted to possess or something that would burn him. I didn't know that his mother would become my greatest ally and my harshest teacher, that she'd see through every defense I had and teach me how to survive in a world I didn't understand. I didn't know that working for this family would mean witnessing things that would test every moral boundary I thought I had, that I'd have to choose between judgment and survival, between who I thought I was and who I needed to become. And I definitely didn't know that Luka Niklaus, the man I'd slapped in front of his entire crew, would become the most important and dangerous person in my life. That what started as curiosity would become obsession. That obsession would become something deeper, something that felt like fate or disaster, or maybe both at the same time. But I'd learn, week by week, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. The slap had been the beginning, but moving into his world, accepting his offer, stepping through that door into his family's house, that was when everything truly changed. That was when Claire Mitchell, the struggling waitress, started becoming someone else entirely. Someone stronger.
Someone more complicated.
Someone who could survive in the darkness without losing herself completely. Or at least, that's what I hoped. Because once you enter the world of people like the Niklaus, there's no easy way out. You either adapt or you break. You either learn the rules or you become a casualty. And I had too much to lose to break. Too many people depending on me. Too much fight left in me. So I'd adapt. I'd learn.
Idę surviva.
Even if it meant getting closer to the man who terrified and fascinated me in equal measure. Even if it meant crossing lines I'd never imagined crossing. Even if it meant discovering that the woman I thought I was had always been capable of so much more. Both good and bad. The journey was just beginning, and I had no idea where it would take me. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't the same person who'd walked into Carmelo's 3 years ago, desperate and invisible. I wasn't even the same person who'd slapped Luka Niklaus a week ago in a moment of exhausted rage. I was becoming someone new. Someone forged by necessity and desperation and the strange attention of a dangerous man. And God help me, part of me was excited to find out who that person would be. Isabella Niklaus was nothing like I expected. When you hear about the mother of a mafia boss, you imagine someone cold. Someone who turned her son into the kind of man who could order violence with a phone call and sleep soundly afterward. You imagine a woman hardened by that life, by those choices, by the blood that bought her comfortable existence. Isabella was sharp, yes. Observant, absolutely. But she was also warm in ways that caught me off guard. She laughed easily. She told stories about Luka as a child that made him sound almost normal, almost human. That first week, she tested me constantly. She'd ask me to bring her tea, then claim it wasn't hot enough even when steam was rising from the cup. She'd request meals at odd hours, change her mind about activities she'd asked me to arrange, send me on errands that felt designed to see how far I'd go without complaining. I recognized the game. It was the same thing customers at Carmelo's used to do. Testing boundaries, seeing if I'd break, trying to figure out if I was real or just another person wearing a service mask.
So I didn't break.
I stayed calm. I redid the tea without arguing. I adjusted schedules without complaining. I ran every errand with a smile that was genuine because honestly, this was still easier than serving entitled customers while my feet screamed in pain. On the 5th day, Isabella called me into her sitting room. It was a beautiful space filled with photographs and old furniture that looked expensive, but comfortable. Like things meant to be used, not just displayed. She gestured for me to sit. Actually sit, not hover nearby waiting for orders. You're not like the others, she said. The other companions? The other women who've tried to work for this family. They either fawn over us like we're royalty, or they judge us like we're monsters. You do neither. I'm just trying to do my job, Mrs. Niklaus. Isabella.
Call me Isabella.
And your job is more than fetching tea and organizing my calendar. Your real job is surviving in this world without losing yourself. That's much harder. I didn't know what to say to that. So I waited. My son is interested in you, she continued. I'm sure you've noticed. He gave me a job. He gave you access. There's a difference. Luca doesn't bring people into our home unless they matter to him. And you matter.
I don't know why yet.
But you do. My heart was beating faster. I slapped him. Maybe he just wants to figure out why. Isabella laughed. A real laugh that made her eyes crinkle. Oh, I like you. You slapped my son in front of his crew, and you're sitting here, making jokes about it. Yes, you'll do nicely. Do nicely for what? For whatever comes next. She leaned forward, her expression turning serious. Let me be clear about something, Claire. This family, our business, the life we live, it's not simple. It's not clean. You'll see things. Hear things. Men coming and going at odd hours. Conversations that stop when you enter a room. Money that moves in ways that don't match what you learned about economics in school. You're telling me to mind my business. I'm telling you to protect yourself by staying curious about the right things and blind to the wrong things. Luca likes that you're strong. But strength without wisdom gets people hurt. Or worse. I understand.
Do you?
Because my son, he can be gentle when he chooses. But he was raised in a world that doesn't reward gentleness. And if he's bringing you close, if he's keeping you here, then you need to understand what that means. For you, for your family, for everyone involved. A chill ran down my spine. Are you warning me away from him? I'm warning you to be careful. There's a difference between being brave and being reckless. You were brave when you slapped him. But staying here, letting him into your life, that might be reckless. Only you can decide which one matters more. Before I could respond, we heard the front door open. Male voices. Luca's voice among them. Isabella's expression shifted immediately. Back to pleasant neutrality. We'll continue this conversation later. Go check on your mother. She had her treatment today, yes?
Yes.
Thank you for arranging the car service. Family takes care of family. Now go. I left the sitting room and headed toward the guest house where my mother and Danny were staying. It was connected to the main house but separate enough that we had privacy. Danny loved it. He had his own room, a yard to play in, and for the first time in his life, he didn't have to be quiet because the walls were thin. My mother was resting when I checked on her. The treatment had gone well, but it always left her exhausted. I sat with her for a while, just being present, until Danny got home from school. He burst through the door with the energy only 8-year-olds possess.
Mom.
Guess what? There's a basketball hoop in the driveway, and Mrs. Niklaus said I can use it whenever I want. That's wonderful, baby. Did you thank her? Like 1,000,000 times. And Mom, she made cookies. Real homemade cookies. Can I have one for snack? I looked at my mother. She was smiling despite her exhaustion. Let him have 2. Growing boy needs his energy. That evening, after Danny was asleep and my mother was settled, I stepped outside for air. The property was quiet. Peaceful. So different from our old apartment where sirens and shouting were the nighttime soundtrack. I found Lucas standing by the garden, smoking a cigarette. He looked different in casual clothes. Less intimidating. Almost approachable. I didn't know you smoked, I said. He turned, not startled. Like he'd known I was there. I don't. Usually. Bad habit. From when I was younger. Sometimes I fall back into it when I'm thinking. What are you thinking about? You. The honesty caught me off guard.
Why?
Because you're an anomaly. Most people who enter this life, they either want something from us or they're afraid of us. You're neither. I want the paycheck. And I'm definitely afraid of you. He smiled, dropped the cigarette, and crushed it under his shoe. You're afraid, but you're here anyway. That's different from letting fear control you. Your mother gave me a warning today.
About getting too close to you.
About the dangers of this life. She's protecting you. That's what she does. Protects the people who matter. Do I matter? He took a step closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. You slapped me, Claire. You saw me being cruel, and you stopped me. Nobody does that. Everyone in my life either fears me or wants something from me, or both. But you just wanted me to stop being an asshole. That's refreshing. So I'm what, a novelty? Something interesting, because I'm different. Maybe at first. But now I don't know what you are. I just know that when I'm here, I look for you. When I'm not here, I think about you. And that hasn't happened in a very long time. My heart was pounding. This was dangerous territory. This was exactly what Isabella had warned me about. I'm not interested in being anyone's distraction, I said. What if you're not a distraction? What if you're something more? Like what? I don't know yet. But I want to find out. He reached out slowly, giving me time to step back if I wanted. His hand touched my face, gentle in a way that contradicted everything I knew about him. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. Tell me this is inappropriate. Tell me you're just an employee, and I'm crossing lines. I should have. I should have stepped back, established boundaries, protected myself from whatever this was becoming. But I didn't. I can't tell you to stop, I whispered. Because I don't want you to.
He leaned in.
His lips touched mine. Soft at first, testing, seeing if I'd pull away. I didn't pull away. The kiss deepened. His hand moved to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. And I let him. I kissed him back with 3 years of loneliness and exhaustion and desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from something complicated. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. This is a terrible idea, I said. Probably. Your mother warned me about this. She's usually right. I have a son. A sick mother. I can't afford complications. I know. So, what are we doing? He smiled. That real smile I was starting to recognize. Something stupid. Something dangerous. Something that feels right even though it shouldn't. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have right now. I want to know you, Claire. I want to understand what makes you brave enough to slap a man like me. I want to see if this feeling I have when you're around is real or just curiosity. And if it's just curiosity, if you figure me out and get bored, then I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll keep the job with my mother.
Keep the housing. Keep the health care.
I'm not going to destroy your life because I'm attracted to you. But you might destroy it by being attracted to me.
Yes.
That's the risk. The question is whether you're willing to take it. I thought about Danny sleeping peacefully in a room with walls thick enough that traffic noise didn't wake him. About my mother getting treatment that was actually working because we could finally afford the good doctors. About how for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't constantly calculating whether we'd survive another month. I thought about Luca's hands on me. The way he looked at me like I was something precious instead of invisible. The possibility that maybe someone could see me, really see me, and want to stay. I'm willing, I said. But I need you to promise me something. What? If this ends badly, if you decide I'm not worth the complication, you don't punish my family for my choices. Danny and my mother, they stay protected. They keep everything you've given them. Whatever happens between us doesn't touch them. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect maybe. Or recognition of what it meant that even in this moment, even wanting him, I was thinking of them first. I promise. On my family's name, your mother and son will always be protected and provided for. No matter what happens between us. Okay then. Okay. Let's do something stupid and dangerous and see where it goes. He kissed me again.
Harder this time.
Like sealing a deal. Like marking a moment we both knew we couldn't take back. And standing there in his family's garden, kissing a man who could destroy me as easily as protect me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years.
Hope.
Dangerous. Complicated. Possibly delusional hope. But hope nonetheless. The next few weeks were strange. Beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Luca would show up at odd hours. Sometimes for dinner with his mother.
Sometimes just to talk to me.
He'd find excuses to be around. Checking on renovations that didn't need checking. Discussing household matters that Isabella could have handled herself. And slowly, carefully, we built something between us. He told me about growing up in this life. About learning at 12 years old what his family really did. About the first time he had to make a choice that couldn't be undone. About the weight of expectation and legacy, and knowing that people's lives depended on his decisions. I told him about my marriage falling apart. About holding my mother's hand during her first chemotherapy session. About the night Danny asked me if they were poor, and I had to figure out how to explain that yes, we were, but we'd be okay anyway. We talked about normal things too. Movies we liked. Books we'd read. Stupid things that made us laugh. He had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. I had a sarcastic streak that seemed to delight him. Isabella watched it all with knowing eyes. She never said I told you so. She just made sure I was eating enough, sleeping enough, taking care of myself while I navigated whatever this was becoming. Danny loved the house, loved the space, loved having his grandmother nearby and not having to worry about being too loud. He'd started calling Isabella Nana and she encouraged it, let him help her in the garden, taught him card games, treated him like the grandson she'd never had. My mother was responding well to treatment. The doctors were optimistic. Her color was better. Her energy was returning. She smiled more. Everything was getting better. That should have been my first warning. In my experience, when everything started going right, that meant something was about to go very wrong. It happened on a Thursday night. Luca had invited me to dinner. Not at the house. A real restaurant. He said he wanted to take me somewhere nice. Show me a life outside of being his employee and his mother's companion. I wore a dress Isabella had insisted on buying me. Nothing too expensive, but nicer than anything I'd owned in years. I felt pretty. Normal. Like a woman on a date instead of a charity case being pitted. The restaurant was beautiful. Quiet and elegant. The kind of place I used to serve in but never imagined eating in. Luca pulled out my chair. Ordered wine. Made conversation that felt natural and easy. For a few hours, I could almost forget who he was, what he did, the darkness that surrounded his life. We were halfway through dinner when his phone rang. He ignored it at first, but it rang again, and again. I'm sorry, he said. I need to take this. He stepped away from the table. I watched him through the window, watched his expression change from relaxed to cold. Watched him become the man everyone feared instead of the man who'd been making me laugh 5 minutes ago. He came back to the table. We need to go.
Now.
What's wrong? I'll explain in the car. Please, Claire. Trust me. Something in his voice made me stand immediately. We left without finishing our meal. His driver was already waiting outside. In the car, Luca held my hand. His grip was tight. Too tight. There's been a situation, he said carefully. Someone made a move against our family. Against our business interests. It's being handled, but it means things are going to be tense for a while. What does that mean for me? For my family? It means you stay at the house. No leaving without security.
No exceptions.
And Claire, you're going to see things in the next few days. Things I wish you didn't have to see. But I need you to stay calm. Stay quiet. And above all, stay safe. Fear crawled up my spine. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. This life I live, it's not a game. And now you're close enough to me that you're in it too. Whether you want to be or not. We arrived back at the house to chaos. Cars I didn't recognize. Men I'd never seen before. Everyone moving with purpose and tension. Luca walked me quickly to the guest house. Isabella was already there with Danny and my mother. Stay here, he ordered. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except me or my mother. Understand? I nodded. Too shocked to argue. He kissed me hard.
Fast.
Like it might be the last time. I'll come back. I promise I'll come back. Then he was gone. And I was left with my terrified son, my worried mother, and the sudden understanding that I'd made a deal I didn't fully understand. I'd traded safety for a different kind of danger. I'd given up control of my life in exchange for comfort. And now something was happening that might cost more than I'd ever agreed to pay. That night, I heard things. Cars coming and going. Raised voices. At one point, something that might have been gunshots or might have been my imagination running wild with fear. Danny slept through it all, exhausted from playing outside. My mother held my hand in the dark. Whatever happens, she whispered, you did what you had to do. You protected us. That's what matters. But I wasn't sure anymore. Maybe I'd protected us right into something worse. Maybe the slap that had seemed so brave was actually the first step toward destruction. Maybe Isabella had been right to warn me. And maybe Luca's promises weren't enough to keep us safe from the life he'd been born into. I sat awake all night, waiting, wondering if he'd come back, wondering what dawn would bring, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life or if somehow, impossibly, this would all turn out okay. The sky was just starting to lighten when I heard the knock on the door. 3 measured knocks. The pattern Luca had told me meant it was safe. I opened the door. He stood there looking exhausted. His shirt was untucked. His jacket was missing. There was blood on his hands.
It's handled, he said.
Everyone's safe. Whose blood is that? Not mine. And nobody who didn't deserve what they got. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, leaned against it like staying upright was taking effort. I'm sorry, he said. I'm sorry you had to see this side of things so soon. I was trying to keep you separate from it. There is no separate, is there? If I'm with you, I'm in all of it. Yes. The honesty hurt, but I preferred it to lies. What happened tonight? A rival family tried to move on our territory, tried to hurt people under our protection. We responded. It's done now. But Claire, this won't be the last time. This life, it comes with violence, with danger, with choices that most people never have to think about. I know.
Do you?
Because it's one thing to know it in theory. It's another thing to sit in a locked house hearing gunshots and wondering if I'm coming back. I walked over to him, took his hands in mine despite the blood. I'm still here, aren't I? I'm not running.
I'm scared, yes.
But I'm not running. He pulled me into his arms, held me so tight I could barely breathe. I need you to understand something, he said into my hair. I never meant for this to be complicated. I never meant for you to matter this much. But you do. And now I have to figure out how to keep you safe while keeping you close. Because letting you go isn't an option anymore. Then don't let me go. Just tell me the truth. Always.
Don't hide what your life is.
Let me choose with full knowledge. Even if that knowledge is terrifying? Especially then. He pulled back to look at me. His eyes were tired, but something else too. Something that looked like it might be love or the beginning of it. You're remarkable, he said. You know that. I'm terrified and trying not to show it. That's what remarkable looks like. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to stay despite it. He kissed me again. Softer this time. Sweeter. Like a promise being sealed. And standing there in the early morning light, holding a man with blood on his hands and danger in his life, I made my choice. I chose to stay. I chose to see where this led. I chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could exist even in darkness. That protection could come from dangerous places. That strength could be found in the most unlikely circumstances. I chose him. Fully. Completely. With my eyes open to exactly what that meant. It was the point of no return. The moment where turning back stopped being an option. The catastrophe that would define everything that came next. I'd walked into his world thinking I could keep one foot out. That I could work for his family without becoming part of it. That I could be close to him without being changed by him. I was wrong about all of it. And I wouldn't realize exactly how wrong until much later, when the cost of these choices became clear and the consequences started piling up like debts I couldn't pay. But in that moment, with dawn breaking and his arms around me and hope still winning over fear, I thought maybe we had a chance. Maybe love was enough. Maybe his protection was real. Maybe I could survive in his world and keep my soul intact. I should have known better. Nothing in my life had ever been that simple. But hope makes fools of us all. And I was the biggest fool of them all for believing this could work. The catastrophe had begun. I just didn't know it yet. The dinners became a pattern. Every week, sometimes twice a week when Luca could manage it. Different restaurants. Different conversations. But always the same feeling. Like we were building something fragile and dangerous and impossible to stop. He was careful around Danny at first. Respectful of boundaries. Just a friendly presence in the house who sometimes brought toys or books. Nothing that would confuse an 8-year-old about who this man was or what he meant to us. But kids are perceptive. especially kids who've learned to watch adults carefully to predict when life might fall apart again. One morning at breakfast, Danny looked up from his cereal and said, "Is Mr. Luca your boyfriend, Mom?" I almost choked on my coffee.
What? No.
He's my employer. His mother is who I work for, remember? But he looks at you the way Prince Eric looks at Ariel. You've been watching too many Disney movies. And you smile different when he's here. Like you're happy but also scared. Like when we got the puppy and you were excited but worried we couldn't take care of it. We didn't get to keep that puppy. Had to return it to the shelter after 2 weeks because our landlord found out and threatened eviction. That memory hurt. It's complicated, baby. Adults always say that when they mean yes but don't want to admit it. Isabella, who'd been sitting quietly at the table reading the paper, laughed. The child has a point, Claire. Not helping, Isabella. I'm not trying to help.
I'm observing.
And what I observe is that my son is falling in love with you, and you're fighting it very hard while also falling right back. I'm not falling in love. I'm being practical. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. She folded her paper and looked at me seriously. But Claire, you need to understand something. Luca's world isn't kind to the people he loves. His father's enemies became his enemies. And now anyone close to Luca becomes a potential target. You need to be aware of that before you let this go any further. I am aware. Are you? Really? Because awareness and acceptance are different things. You can know danger exists and still be unprepared when it shows up at your door. Her words felt like prophecy, like a warning I should have heeded more carefully. But I was already in too deep. Already imagining futures I had no business dreaming about. Already letting myself believe that maybe this impossible thing could somehow work. The signs were there. I just didn't recognize them yet. It started small. A black SUV that seemed to be on the same streets when I drove Danny to school. The same face in the coffee shop twice in 1 week. Phone calls that disconnected the moment I answered. I mentioned it to Luca during one of our dinners. His face went still. How long has this been happening? Maybe 2 weeks? I noticed the SUV first, then the other things. What did the vehicle look like? License plate. I told him what I remembered. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then put it away. It's probably nothing. Just my security team checking perimeters. But I'll look into it. You have people following me? I have people watching out for you. There's a difference. You're living in my family's house, Claire. That makes you part of my responsibility. Part of what I protect. I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection. You just haven't needed it in ways you could see before. He reached across the table, took my hand. Let me worry about this. That's what I'm good at. You focus on Danny and my mother and letting yourself be happy.
Can you do that?
I wanted to argue, wanted to push back against being managed and protected like I was helpless. But the warmth of his hand on mine, the genuine concern in his eyes, it made me soften.
Fine.
But if something's actually wrong, you tell me. Don't hide things to protect me.
Deal.
But he was already hiding things. I just didn't know how much yet. The next week, Isabella asked me to accompany her to a family dinner. A gathering at the main Niklaus estate where Luca's extended family met once a month for what she called tradition, and what I suspected was really business disguised as pasta. You don't have to go, she said. But it would mean something if you did.
To me.
And to Luca. What would it mean? That you're not just his mother's companion. That you're becoming part of this family. If you're ready for that. Was I ready? I didn't know. But I said yes anyway because saying no felt like closing a door I wasn't ready to close yet. The Niklaus family estate was massive. Old stone and manicured grounds, the kind of place that had been in the family for generations. Cars lined the circular driveway. Expensive vehicles belonging to people I'd never met, but whose reputations preceded them. Luca met us at the door. He was in full boss mode tonight. Expensive suit, cold eyes, that commanding presence that made people straighten their spines. But when he saw me, something softened. You came. Your mother insisted. I'm glad she did. He offered me his arm. Stay close to me. Family dinners can be intense. That was an understatement. The dining room was full of Nicholas. Luca's two brothers, their wives, various cousins and uncles, and people whose connection to the family I couldn't quite determine. Everyone was polite when Isabella introduced me. Polite but assessing. Trying to figure out who I was and why I mattered. I felt every eye on me. Every judgment. Every question they were too well-mannered to ask out loud. We sat down to dinner. The food was incredible, the wine flowed freely, and the conversation danced around topics I didn't fully understand. Business deals that weren't really business deals. Territorial disputes that sounded like real estate discussions but felt like something darker. Names I didn't recognize but that made people nod knowingly. I stayed quiet, listened, tried to be invisible, until Luca's younger brother, Michael, turned his attention to me. "So, Claire, my brother tells us you used to be a waitress." "That's right. And now you're taking care of our mother. Quite an upgrade." The way he said upgrade made my skin prickle. Like I was a gold digger. A opportunist. Someone who'd manipulated my way into this family. "I'm grateful for the opportunity," I said carefully. "I'm sure you are." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Must be nice to go from serving tables to living in luxury. All because you caught Luca's eye." "Michael." Luca's voice was quiet but sharp. "A warning."
What?
"I'm just making conversation. Getting to know the woman my brother is so interested in. The woman who's suddenly living in our family property and attending our private dinners." "That's allowed, isn't it?" Isabella set down her wine glass. "Michael, that's enough. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." She appears out of nowhere, slaps Luca in public, and suddenly she's got a job and a house, and our brother following her around like a lovesick puppy. You have to admit it's suspicious. The table went silent. Everyone watching to see what would happen next. I could feel my face burning. Every insecurity I'd buried was suddenly on display. The poor girl who didn't belong. The outsider trying to infiltrate a world above her station. The woman who wasn't good enough. Luca stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, the sound loud in the sudden quiet. "Claire, would you excuse us for a moment?" He didn't wait for an answer. Just walked out, expecting Michael to follow. Which he did after shooting me one more assessing look. The room slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed, but they felt forced. Isabella leaned close to me. "Don't let Michael get to you. He's suspicious of everyone. It comes with the territory. He's not wrong, though. I am an outsider. I don't belong here. You belong if Lucas says you belong. And more importantly, you belong if you decide you do. Don't let anyone make you feel less than simply because you started with less. We all started somewhere. But it was hard not to feel exactly that. Less than. Out of place. A fraud playing dress up in a world I didn't understand." Luca came back 15 minutes later. Michael didn't. Luca's face was calm, but I could see tension in his jaw. In the way he moved. He'd been angry. Maybe still was. He sat down next to me, leaned close and whispered, "I'm sorry about that. Michael can be protective to the point of offensive. But he won't bother you again." "What did you say to him?" "That you're important to me, and if he disrespects you again, we're going to have a serious problem. Family or not." The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but the damage was done. I felt exposed. Vulnerable. Every smile felt fake. Every conversation felt like a test I wasn't passing. When we finally left, I was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with being tired. Luca drove me and Isabella home. Neither of them spoke, giving me space to process. When we arrived, Isabella went inside, but Luca caught my arm before I could follow. "Talk to me."
About what?
"About what you're thinking. About what Michael said. About whether you're going to let his paranoia push you away. Am I wrong to feel like I don't belong? Like I'm playing a role I'm not qualified for? You belong because you're here. Because I want you here. Because my mother adores you and Danny is happy, and you've made this place feel like more than just a house. That's all the qualification you need. Your brother thinks I'm using you. My brother thinks everyone is using everyone. It's how he survives. But I know better. I know you, Claire. I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know you're here because you needed help and I offered it. But you're staying because there's something between us that neither of us expected. And that terrifies you as much as it terrifies me." He was right. It did terrify me. What if this doesn't work? I whispered. What if I can't fit into your world? What if I'm not strong enough for this? Then we figured out together. But don't make that decision based on Michael's suspicions or anyone else's judgment. Make it based on what you want, on what feels right to you. What felt right was complicated. Being with Luca felt right. The way he looked at me felt right. The life I was building for Danny and my mother felt right. But the danger, the scrutiny, the constant feeling of being tested, that felt wrong. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. But time was something we didn't have as much of as we thought. 2 days later, I was walking Danny to school when I noticed the black SUV again. The same one I'd mentioned to Luca. It was parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. My stomach dropped. This wasn't Luca's security. I knew it in my bones. I hurried Danny inside the school, waited until I saw him safely in his classroom, then walked back outside. The SUV was still there. I pulled out my phone, started to dial Luca's number. Before I could hit call, a man approached me. Mid-40s, average height, forgettable face. The kind of person who could disappear in a crowd. Claire Mitchell. Who's asking? Someone who wants to give you some advice. Free of charge. He smiled, but it was cold. Professional. You're getting involved with people you don't understand. Making choices that will have consequences.
For you.
For your son. For your sick mother. Fear shot through me like electricity. Are you threatening my family? I'm informing you. There's a difference. The Nicklaus have enemies, Ms. Mitchell. And those enemies don't distinguish between family members and employees. You're in the crosshairs now, whether you want to be or not. So you have a choice. Walk away while you still can, or accept that your life just got very dangerous. Who sent you? Does it matter? Just know that this is your only warning. Next time we meet, it won't be for conversation. He walked away, got into the SUV, drove off like this was a normal Tuesday morning, and he hadn't just threatened everything I loved. I stood there shaking, phone still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. Someone was watching me. Someone dangerous. And they knew about Danny, about my mother, about everything. I called Luca. He answered on the first ring. Claire? What's wrong? I told him everything. About the man, the threats, the SUV that had been following me. My voice was shaking, but I got through it. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, dangerously, where are you right now? Outside Danny's school. Stay there. I'm sending people. They'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Just wait. Luca, what's happening? Someone's trying to get to me through you. But they made a mistake. They showed their hand too early. And now I know they're coming. Should I take Danny out of school? Should we leave?
No.
Running makes you look guilty and weak. We stand our ground. I'll handle this. But Claire, you need to trust me.
Completely. Can you do that? Could I?
I was terrified. My son was in danger. My mother was vulnerable. Everything I'd been building was crumbling. But Luca's voice was steady.
Certain.
The voice of a man who'd handled worse than this. Yes, I said. I trust you.
Good.
My people will be there soon. They'll take you home. You'll stay inside with security until I figure out who's behind this. And Claire? Yeah. This doesn't change how I feel about you. This isn't your fault. This is my world bleeding into yours. And I'm sorry. But I will fix this. I promise. The line went dead. 2 minutes later, 3 black SUVs pulled up. Real security this time. Men in suits who moved with military precision. They surrounded me, escorted me to a vehicle, and drove me back to the house where more security was already in place. Isabella met me at the door. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. What happened? I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each word. They're testing boundaries, she said when I finished. Seeing if you'll break. If they can use you against Luca, this is how it starts. How it starts.
Va.
Someone's making a move against our family, and they think you're the weak point. They're wrong. But that won't stop them from trying. What do? You survive. You protect your family. And you let Luca handle the rest. That's what he's good at. That's what he was trained for his entire life. But I didn't want to be a weakness. Didn't want to be the vulnerability that got exploited. Didn't want my son caught in crossfire I'd walked us into. Maybe Michael was right, I said quietly. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I should leave before this gets worse. Isabella grabbed my shoulders, forced me to look at her. If you leave now, they win. They prove that threats work, that you're weak, that Luca can be controlled by hurting the people he cares about. Is that what you want? To teach them that lesson? I want my son to be safe. Then you stay. You let Luca protect you. And you show these people that you're not afraid. Because the moment you show fear, you become a target for every enemy this family has ever made. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing and feeling were different things. I spent the rest of the day in the house with security posted at every entrance. My mother stayed in her room, reading peacefully, either unaware or choosing not to acknowledge the danger. Danny came home from school surrounded by guards he thought were cool, asking if he could have a bulletproof vest like the men outside. And I waited for Luca, for answers, for reassurance that I hadn't destroyed our lives by falling for the wrong man. He came home just after dark, walked in looking tired and dangerous, and somehow relieved when he saw me. You're okay. We're okay.
For now.
Who is he? Someone who works for a competitor. Someone who thought threatening you would give them leverage. They were wrong. What did you do? What I had to do. His voice was flat, final. And I understood that I was better off not knowing the details. He sat down next to me on the couch, pulled me close. And for a moment we just sat there, breathing, grateful to be alive and together and intact. This is my life, Claire. This is what it means to be with me.
Danger. Threats.
Constant vigilance. If you want out, I understand. I'll make sure you and Danny and your mother are taken care of. Safe. Protected. But away from me. Away from all of this. He was giving me an exit. A clean break. Everything I'd wanted hours ago. But sitting there in his arms, feeling his heartbeat, knowing he'd moved heaven and earth to keep us safe, I realized something. I didn't want out. I wanted in. All the way. Consequences and danger and terrifying choices included. I'm not leaving. Claire. I'm not leaving. I repeated, more firmly this time. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, this is dangerous. But I've been scared and in danger my whole life. Different kinds, but still real. At least with you, I know someone's fighting for me. Someone sees me as worth protecting, worth fighting for. I've never had that before. You deserve so much better than this. Maybe. But this is what I'm choosing. You're what I'm choosing. So stop trying to push me away to protect me and just let me stay. He kissed me then. Finally. After weeks of dinners and almost moments and careful boundaries. He kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like I was the answer to questions he'd been asking his whole life. And I kissed him back.
Choosing danger.
Choosing him. Choosing this impossible, terrifying, beautiful thing we were building together. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the craziest. You said that once before. The answer hasn't changed. Still can't decide which. Maybe I'm both. That's what I'm counting on. We sat there together as night fell around us. Security patrolling outside. Danny asleep upstairs. My mother safe in her room. Isabella probably smiling knowingly somewhere in the house. This was my life now. Dangerous. Complicated. Nothing like what I'd planned. But it was mine. I was choosing it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. Even if living meant learning to exist in the space between safety and danger. Between love and fear. Between the woman I was and the woman I was becoming. The deception was just beginning. The pressure would only increase. And the real tests were still ahead. But for tonight, in Luca's arms, I let myself believe we could handle anything. I let myself hope. The next 3 weeks felt like living in a dream that was slowly revealing itself to be something else entirely. Something darker. Something I should have seen coming, but didn't because I was too busy being happy. Luca, and I stopped pretending there was professional distance between us. We were together now. Really together. He stayed for dinner most nights. Read stories to Danny before bed. Sat with my mother in the garden discussing books and philosophy and life. Kissed me goodnight before leaving for whatever business required his attention. It felt like building a family. Like creating something real and lasting out of impossible circumstances. Danny adored him. Started calling him Luca instead of Mr. Niklaus. Asked him questions about everything. Guys stuff I couldn't help with. How to throw a baseball. Why cars made certain sounds. What it was like to be in charge of things. My mother improved steadily. The best doctors, the right medications, treatments that were actually working. She had energy again. Color in her cheeks. Hope in her eyes when she talked about the future. And me? I was falling. Hard and fast and completely. Falling in love with a man I'd once hated. Finding pieces of myself I'd forgotten existed. Laughing more. Worrying less. Believing that maybe, just maybe, life could be good. Isabella watched all of this with knowing eyes and careful silence. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Sadness, mixed with something else. Regret maybe. Or warning. What? I asked her one afternoon. We were in the garden, Danny was at school, and she'd been watching me for 10 minutes, without saying anything. Nothing. Just remembering. Remembering what? What it felt like to be where you are.
Young.
In love. Believing that love was enough to overcome anything. She turned to face me fully. Can I tell you something, Claire? Something that might upset you, but needs to be said? My stomach tightened. Of course. My husband, Luca's father, he was a good man. Complicated, dangerous, involved in things I chose not to think too hard about. But he loved me. Truly loved me. And I loved him back with everything I had. We built a life together. Had 3 sons. Created something that felt solid and safe and permanent. That sounds beautiful. It was. Until his enemies decided the best way to hurt him was through me. Through our children. She paused, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. They took our youngest son. Just for a few hours. Just to prove they could. Just to show my husband that nothing he loved was untouchable. I stopped breathing. What happened? We got him back. My husband made sure those responsible never threatened us again. But something broke that day. The illusion of safety. The belief that love could protect us from the darkness. I realized that being with a man like my husband meant living with constant fear. Meant accepting that any moment of happiness could be shattered by violence we couldn't control. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to understand what you're choosing. Luca is more like his father than he realizes. Powerful. Protective. Willing to do terrible things to keep the people he loves safe. But that protection comes with a price. And the price is knowing that you'll always be a target. That Danny will always be in danger. That every happy moment is borrowed time before the next threat arrives. Tears burned my eyes. Are you saying I should leave? I'm saying you should go in with your eyes open. Don't let happiness blind you to reality. If you stay, stay because you accept all of it. The good and the terrible. The love and the danger. Don't stay because you're hoping things will magically get better or safer. They won't. This is the life. And it doesn't change just because we want it to. Her words haunted me for days. But I pushed them aside. Told myself we were different. That Luca was careful. That the security measures he'd put in place were enough. That love really could be enough if we just wanted it badly enough. I was wrong. It started the way these things always start.
Small.
Easy to dismiss. Luca was late for dinner. Not unusual. His business often ran over. But he didn't call.
Didn't text.
Just disappeared for 3 hours with no explanation. When he finally arrived, he was distracted.
Distant.
Like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Everything okay? I asked as we stood in the kitchen, the house quiet around us.
Fine.
Just business complications. Anything I can help with?
No.
Nothing for you to worry about. He kissed my forehead. I should go. Early meetings tomorrow. He left before I could ask more questions. Before I could push past his walls and figure out what was really going on. The next day, I overheard a phone conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd gone to Luca's home office looking for Isabella. She'd mentioned some documents I needed to sign for Danny's school. The door was cracked open. Voices inside. I was about to knock when I heard my name. Claire can't know about this. That was Luca's voice.
Hard.
Commanding.
Not yet.
Maybe not ever. She's going to find out eventually. A voice I didn't recognize.
Male.
Older. These things always come out. Then we make sure it doesn't. The arrangement stays between us. She thinks this is real. Let her keep thinking that. My blood went cold. Arrangement? What arrangement? And if she asks questions? She won't. She's too grateful for everything I've provided. Too invested in the life we've built. People don't question gifts when they're desperate. The other man laughed. You're more like your father than you admit. He knew how to leverage people's weaknesses too. Find what they need most and make yourself the only one who can provide it. Classic control strategy. This isn't about control. This is about protection. About keeping her exactly where I can watch over her.
Keep telling yourself that.
But we both know what this really is. You found a woman you couldn't have any other way, so you manufactured circumstances that made her need you. Brilliant, really. Ruthless, but brilliant. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't process what I was hearing. The hospital bills, the other man continued. The experimental treatment her mother's getting. The private school for the kid. The apartment they were about to lose. You orchestrated all of it. Created the crisis, then swooped in as the savior. She never had a choice. You just made her think she did. Enough. Luca's voice was sharp. What's done is done. The important thing is she's safe. They're all safe. That's what matters. And conveniently dependent on you for everything. Tell me, does she know you paid off her ex-husband to abandon them? That you made sure she got fired from her other jobs so Carmelo's was her only option? That you arranged for her mother's insurance to deny coverage so the bills would be catastrophic enough to make her desperate? The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew shattered like glass. Those details aren't relevant. They're relevant if she finds out. If she realizes you've been manipulating her life for months before you even officially met her. That everything she thinks was bad luck or coincidence was really you pulling strings to make her need you. She won't find out. And this conversation is over. I heard movement. Footsteps approaching the door. I ran. Down the hallway, around the corner, into the bathroom where I locked the door and tried not to throw up. Everything was a lie. Everything. My ex-husband leaving. Not his choice. Luca paid him to go. Losing my jobs. Not bad luck. Luca made sure I got fired. My mother's insurance denying coverage. Not bureaucratic error. Luca arranged it. The catastrophic bills that pushed me into desperation. Not unfortunate circumstances. Manufactured crisis designed to make me vulnerable enough to accept help from a stranger who wasn't really a stranger at all. He'd been orchestrating my life. Creating problems so he could solve them. Manufacturing dependence so I'd be too grateful to question him. I thought about the night I'd slapped him. About how he'd smiled like I'd surprised him. But had I? Or had he known exactly how I'd react because he'd been studying me long enough to predict it? I thought about the job offer. The perfect timing. The generous salary. The house. The security. Every single thing that had felt like salvation. It was all control. Manipulation. A cage dressed up as freedom. I sat on that bathroom floor for 20 minutes shaking, trying to figure out what to do with this information. Who to tell. How to escape. But escape to where? He owned everything in my life now. The house we lived in. The school Danny attended. The doctors treating my mother. Even the car I drove was registered to his company. He'd made himself indispensable. Made sure I had nowhere to go if I left. No resources. No options. Nothing except the life he'd built for me. I'd thought I was choosing him. Choosing this life. Choosing to be brave. But I'd never had a choice at all. Just the illusion of one. Just enough freedom to make me believe I was making my own decisions while he controlled everything from the shadows. The woman I'd thought I was becoming. Strong.
Brave.
Choosing her own path. That was a fiction. A story I told myself because the truth was too horrible to accept. I was a puppet, and Luca had been pulling my strings from the beginning. I heard a knock on the bathroom door. "Claire? You in there?" Isabella's voice. Concerned. Caring. Or was that an act too? Did she know? Was she part of this?
Ivy fine.
Just not feeling well. "Can I get you anything?"
No.
"I just need a minute." Her footsteps retreated. I sat there in silence, trying to figure out my next move. I could confront him. Demand the truth. But what good would that do? He'd already admitted everything to his associate. Admitted that this was about control. About leveraging my desperation. About making sure I needed him too much to leave. I could leave anyway. Pack up Danny and my mother and run.
But to where?
With what money? And how long before he found us? How long before his reach extended wherever we went? I could stay and pretend I didn't know. Play the grateful girlfriend while secretly planning an escape. But that would take time. Resources I didn't have. And every day I stayed, I'd be living a lie, loving a man who'd manipulated everything about my existence. There were no good options. Just varying degrees of terrible. I finally pulled myself together enough to leave the bathroom. Made it to my room without seeing anyone. Sat on my bed staring at nothing while my mind raced through possibilities and came up empty every time. That's where Danny found me an hour later. "Mom, you okay? You missed lunch." I forced a smile. "Just tired, baby. Come here." He climbed onto the bed next to me. 8 years old and still small enough to fit perfectly against my side. "Is something wrong?" "Why do you ask?" "You feel sad. Like when Dad left. Like you're trying to be brave, but you're really scared." Too perceptive. Always too perceptive. "I'm just thinking about some adult stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about Luca?" My breath caught. "What makes you say that?" "Because you're always happy when he's here. But today you're not. And he looked weird this morning. Like he was hiding something." Children see what adults miss. Notice the patterns we think we're concealing. "Do you like Luca?" I asked instead of answering.
Yeah.
"He's nice. He listens when I talk. And he makes you smile. That's important. You didn't smile much before we came here. What if I told you we might need to leave? Go somewhere else?" His face fell. "But I like it here. I like my school. I like my room. And Grandma's getting better. And you're not always tired anymore. Do we really have to go?" And there it was. The trap. The reason Luca's manipulation worked so well. Because leaving meant taking everything good away from the people I loved. Meant Danny losing his school and his stability. Meant my mother losing the treatments that were saving her life. Meant going back to desperation and exhaustion and constant fear. "Maybe not," I said quietly. "Maybe we can stay. But at what cost? At the cost of my dignity? My autonomy? My sense of self?" Luca came to dinner that night like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't been discussing his manipulation of my entire life just hours earlier. He kissed me hello. Played with Danny. Complimented my mother on her improving health. All of it felt like a performance now. A carefully constructed illusion. "Can we talk?" I said after dinner. After Danny was in bed and my mother had retired. After there were no more excuses to avoid this conversation. Privately. Something flickered in his eyes. Concern maybe. Or guilt. But he nodded. "Of course. My study." We walked there in silence. He closed the door behind us. Poured himself a drink he probably needed. "What's wrong?" I could play dumb. Pretend I hadn't heard anything. Let this continue. Or I could do what I'd done in that restaurant months ago. Stand up. Speak truth. Refuse to be invisible. I heard you today, talking in your office, about the arrangement, about how you orchestrated everything. My ex-husband leaving.
My jobs.
My mother's insurance. All of it. He went very still. The way predators go still when they're calculating their next move. Claire. Don't
lie to me.
Don't try to spin this into something it's not. I heard everything. I know what you did. I know this whole thing has been a manipulation from the start. It wasn't manipulation. It was protection. Protection? You ruined my life, so you could save me from the ruins you created. That's not protection. That's control. I saw you. His voice was quiet but intense. Months before you ever served my table. You came into Carmelo's one night with your mother. It was her birthday. You'd saved money to take her somewhere nice. And I watched you that night. Watched how you treated her. How you smiled even though you were exhausted. How you handled disappointment when the bill was more than you expected. And I thought, that's someone worth knowing. Someone real in a world of people playing parts. So, you decided to destroy my life? I decided to clear obstacles. Your ex-husband was bleeding you dry, demanding money he wasn't entitled to, threatening to fight for custody he didn't want just to hurt you. I made him go away. Your other job, they were violating labor laws, not paying you properly, and you were too desperate to fight back. I got you out of there. Your mother's insurance, they were looking for any excuse to deny coverage. I expedited the process so you'd qualify for better treatment. You're twisting everything to sound noble when it was really about control. It was about giving you a path to me.
Yes.
I wanted you in my life, but I also wanted you safe, stable, away from people and situations that were hurting you. You didn't give me a choice. If I'd approached you as a stranger offering help, you would have said no. You're too proud, too independent. You needed to feel like you'd earned it, like you were working for what you received. So I created circumstances where you could accept help without sacrificing your dignity. You manipulated me. I protected you. Those aren't the same thing. In my world they are. His voice rose for the first time, frustration breaking through. In my world, protection means controlling variables, eliminating threats, making sure the people I care about are exactly where I can keep them safe. That's what love looks like for people like me, Claire. Imperfect, controlling, but genuine. That's not love. That's possession. Maybe, but it kept you alive, kept Danny safe, kept your mother healthy. Would you rather I'd left you to drown in circumstances you couldn't overcome just so you could feel morally superior about making your own choices? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to claim I'd rather struggle with dignity than thrive under manipulation. But looking at him, at the genuine pain in his eyes, at the twisted logic that made sense in his world even if it destroyed mine, I couldn't. Because he wasn't entirely wrong. Left to my own devices, I would have drowned, would have lost my apartment, would have watched my mother die because I couldn't afford treatment, would have raised Danny in poverty and fear and instability. Luca had saved us. Just not in the way I thought. Not in the way I could live with knowing. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to figure out if I can accept what you did. If I can live with knowing everything I thought was my choice was really yours. How much time? I don't know. But I need you to leave me alone while I figure it out. No pressure.
No manipulation.
No orchestrating my life. Just space. He nodded slowly. Okay. You can stay here. You, and Danny, and your mother. Everything I've provided continues regardless of what you decide about us. I meant what I said. This isn't transactional. Isn't it though? You created my need then filled it. That's the definition of transaction. It's also the definition of love. Seeing what someone needs and providing it. The methods were questionable. I admit that. But the intent was genuine. I didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know if intent mattered when the execution was manipulation. Didn't know if I could forgive methods just because results were good. I need you to go. Claire,
Please.
just go. He looked like he wanted to argue,
To stay.
to fix this with words or promises or whatever tool he usually used to get what he wanted. But maybe he sensed that pushing now would break something beyond repair. I love you, he said at the door. Everything I did, everything I've been doing, it's because I love you. And I know that's not enough. I know love doesn't excuse manipulation, but it's the truth. And I need you to know it. Then he left. And I stood in his study surrounded by books and expensive furniture and evidence of power I didn't understand, trying to figure out who I was in all of this. Was I the victim of an elaborate scheme? Or the beneficiary of complicated protection? Was I the woman who'd been robbed of choice? Or the woman who'd been given options I never would have had otherwise? Was Luca a manipulator who'd controlled my life? Or a broken man who protected people the only way he knew how? I didn't know. Couldn't figure it out. Couldn't reconcile the man who made Danny laugh with the man who'd paid my ex-husband to abandon us. Couldn't match the man who sat with my dying mother with the man who'd made sure her insurance denied coverage so I'd be desperate enough to accept his help. But I knew one thing. The woman I'd thought I was, the woman who was bravely choosing her own path, she didn't exist. She never had. I'd been living a story someone else wrote for me, following a script I didn't know existed. And now I had to decide if I could rewrite the ending. If I could take this manipulation and turn it into agency. If I could transform being a puppet into being a player. Or if I needed to cut all the strings and walk away, even if it meant losing everything I'd gained. The devastation wasn't just discovering the truth. It was realizing that the truth didn't come with clear answers. That right and wrong were tangled together in ways that made judgment impossible. That love and control could coexist in the same actions. That I could be both victim and beneficiary of the same manipulation. And somehow I had to live with all of that. Somehow I had to decide who I wanted to be in the ruins of everything I'd believed. I spent 2 weeks in hell. Not the external kind. The internal kind where every thought was a battle and every decision felt impossible. Luca kept his distance like I'd asked, but his presence was everywhere. In the house we lived in, the food we ate, the security that followed Danny to school, the doctors treating my mother. He was woven into every part of our lives so completely that removing him meant unraveling everything. My mother got worse. Not the cancer. Something else. An infection from the treatment. She spiked a fever that wouldn't break. The doctors said it was manageable but serious. She needed to stay in the hospital for observation. I sat by her bed watching machines monitor her vitals and thought about what would happen if I left. If I took Danny and ran. Would Luca continue paying for this? Or would my pride cost my mother her life? You're thinking too hard, my mother said weakly. Her eyes were closed, but she always knew. I'm thinking the right amount. You found out something bad about Luca. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because you've been moving through this house like a ghost for 2 weeks. And he hasn't been around. Doesn't take a genius to figure it out. She opened her eyes, looked at me directly. What did he do? I told her everything. About the manipulation. The orchestration. The control disguised as salvation. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Your father was a drunk. Your ex-husband was a coward. And Luca is a manipulator. You sure know how to pick them. Despite everything, I laughed. Not helpful, Mom. Want to know what is helpful? The truth. Which is that Luca's methods were wrong. Controlling. Completely unacceptable in any normal relationship. But Claire, we stopped living in normal a long time ago. Normal was watching you work yourself to death. Normal was me dying slowly because we couldn't afford treatment. Normal was Danny growing up poor and scared and watching his mother break. Luca gave us abnormal. And abnormal has been pretty good to us. So, I should just accept it? Forgive him, because the results were good. I'm saying you should decide what matters more. Being right about how things should have happened, or being alive and healthy and safe for how things actually did happen. Pride is expensive, baby. And we're not in a position to afford it. You're saying I should stay with him. I'm saying you should stop pretending you have better options. You don't. And more importantly, you don't want them. You love him. I see it in your face every time his name comes up. You're not angry because he manipulated you. You're angry because you can't trust your own feelings now. Can't be sure if what you feel is real or manufactured.
She was right.
That was exactly what hurt most. Not knowing if my love was genuine or just Stockholm Syndrome with better scenery. What do? You make a choice. Real this time. Knowing everything. Seeing clearly. You decide if you can live with what he did. If you can love a man who protects through control. If you can build something real on a foundation of manipulation. And whatever you decide, you own it. No more pretending you didn't have a choice. You do.
Right now.
This moment. Choose. 3 days later, my mother's fever broke. She stabilized. Started recovering. And I realized something sitting in that hospital room. I'd already made my choice. I'd made it the moment I didn't pack our bags and leave. The moment I let Luca continue providing even when I knew the truth. The moment I chose my mother's health and Danny's safety over my pride. I just hadn't admitted it yet. But then everything got worse. I came home from the hospital one evening to find the house in chaos. Security everywhere. Isabella's face pale.
And Danny missing.
What happened? I demanded. Where's my son? Gone, Isabella said. Her voice was shaking. Someone took him from school. Grabbed him during dismissal. The security team, they tried to stop it, but there were too many of them. The world stopped. Everything narrowed to one thought.
Danny.
Someone had Danny. Who? The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. Every minute felt like a year. Every second, without news, felt like dying slowly. Isabella stayed with me. Held my hand. Prayed in Italian under her breath. My phone rang.
Luca.
I found him. He's safe. We're coming home. I couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything but cry harder. Claire? Did you hear me? He's okay. Not hurt. Scared but okay. We're 20 minutes away. Okay. My voice didn't sound like mine. Okay. The longest 20 minutes of my existence. And then they were there. Luca carrying Danny through the door. My son launched himself at me and I caught him, held him, breathed him in. Mommy, I was so scared. I know, baby.
I know.
But you're safe now. You're home. I looked up at Luca. There was blood on his shirt. Not his blood, I knew instinctively. He'd done things to get Danny back. Terrible things. Things I didn't want to know about. But he'd brought my son home. He'd kept his promise. And looking at him standing there, exhausted and bloody and relieved, I realized something. I'd already forgiven him. Somewhere in the terror of the last 6 hours, I'd let go of the anger about manipulation. Because when it mattered most, when Danny needed saving, Luca had moved heaven and earth. Had risked everything. Had proven that whatever his methods, his love for us was real. After Danny finally fell asleep in my arms, after my mother called crying with relief, after the house settled into exhausted peace, I found Luca in his study. He was pouring a drink with shaking hands. Thank you, I said from the doorway. He turned. You don't have to thank me. This was my fault. My world did this. And you fixed it. You brought him home. I walked closer. The men who took him. Are they?
Gone.
They'll never threaten anyone again. Good. He looked surprised. You're not going to judge me for that. A week ago, maybe.
But not now.
Not after they took my son. They got what they deserved. Claire, I need to tell you something. About what I did. About how I found him.
No.
I don't need details. I just need to know it's over. That we're safe. That those men can't hurt us anymore. It's over. I made sure of it. But there will always be others. Always be threats. That's the reality of my life. Of our life if you stay. And after everything that's happened, after how wrong I was about manipulating you, after Danny being taken, I can't ask you to stay anymore. You should go. Take Danny. Take your mother. I'll set you up somewhere safe. Somewhere far from here. You'll never have to worry about money or security or any of this ever again. But you'll be free of me. Free of this world. He was giving me the out. The real one this time.
No manipulation.
No control. Just a genuine choice. And I realized I didn't want it. I'm not leaving. Claire. I said I'm not leaving. Yes, your methods were wrong. Yes, you manipulated me. Yes, your world